Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. So today we are going to be continuing through the cardiovascular system with a little aside here related to when we talked about the blood and the lymphatic system and the immune cells and the defenses floating around in the blood. So today we are focused on lymphatic structures and function, which relates to the immune system. Now we're not doing a deep dive into the immune system, just giving an overall structure and function here thing. If we went into the immune system, that'd be its own. I mean, I teach an entire semester in immunology, so it's hard to do that justice here. But note that it is linked to this lymphatic system, and that's what we're going to be focused on today. So, your lymphatic system, I know we haven't gone over the blood vessels and all of that yet, but your lymphatic system they are vessels like your blood vessels in a way. They're kind of like your veins, um, and they collect fluids in your body around capillaries. So here is, lymphatic vessels, they have these little blunt ends, and then here's a capillary bed, and they bring in fluid. It's then called lymph fluid, and then it moves through these vessels. So they have little valves in them because they are low pressure, it prevents backflow, and as they move through, they go through all these different nodes. These are called lymph nodes. And the purpose of a lymph node is there's usually one arriving pathway. Is called the afferent pathway. And then there's multiple arriving pathways and then fewer exiting pathways, meaning there's a traffic jam and the fluid flow in a lymph node slows down, and allows processing for any pathogens or anything like that moving about your body. And in your lymph node, you have some of your lymphatic cells. So there's all your vessels in the lymphatic system, which drain right into your right and left subclavian veins up here. There's some ducts that they drain into. I'll show those coming out. We'll also show where it empties. It's not an equal distribution left and right, but lymph node wise, you have your inguinal lymph nodes down here in the groin. There are the axillary ones in the armpit. There are cervical ones in the neck. And if you ever have an infected lymph nodes, you can see these swollen nodes. There's also one that's kind of covered right here called the cisterna chyli, found in the abdominal region. There are some other accessory organs involved with the lymphatic system, such as your tonsils. Example of one here are the adenoids. These can become infected and inflamed. Thymus is an important one. That's where T cells go to mature after they're being made in the red bone marrow. Remember, T cells are a lymphocyte, the other ones being the B cells. And all those are made in the red bone marrow here. All right, so that was a little introduction to the system. Now we're going to go into things I just talked about in a little bit more detail. So first up, we have those lymphatic vessels in the lymph fluid. I mentioned the fluid inside is the lymph. Here, this color coding actually shows areas of the body that are drained from networks of vessels. So the right side of your body, your right vessels only drain that much of your body. And here they drain, here's the right subclavian, internal jugular. These are veins that then feed into the superior vena cava. This is where your lymphatic system, after cleansing all that fluid and processing it, it dumps it back into your cardiovascular system and it goes back to your heart. But it's not an equal left and right drainage coming in. Your left vessels here drain the entire lower body, arms, and the other side of your head. So a lot more is drained on the left side. It comes all up through the thoracic duct right here, through a large collection sinus area called the cisterna chyli of that thoracic duct, and then it drains just like the other one here into that left subclavian. It enters in and then also comes down the superior vena cava right there and into the heart. But long story short, all these vessels end up draining in the heart and they pick up interstitial fluid. Interstitial fluid, when you have a capillary bed, we talked about that a little bit here. These capillaries release fluids. Anything that's not taken back into the other end of the capillary is then taken up into the lymphatic system if it needs. It can then get processed. Oh, another organ we didn't talk about here that also is an important one for processing blood is your spleen. Almost forgot to mention the spleen. So up next, we're going to talk about those lymph nodes in a little bit more detail. Like I said, afferent vessels are the arriving ones. So here, this is where fluids entering the lymph nodes. Here, these are efferent vessels. So this one's showing 3 coming in and 2 going out. That means there's a slow down of flow. So when fluids come in, they go around these little. So here you have the cortex, which is the outer layer. You have the capsule, which is the connective tissue structure around the outside. So the fluid comes into the cortex, and then these trabeculae separate. So trabeculae are just these little spikes that kind of separate the little lymphoid follicles, which contain the germinal centers. Germinal centers are right here, and that's where you have active proliferating B cells. So here that's showing a germinal center. This would be a trabeculae right here, which separating it out here is the cortex. So the subscapular sinus, labeled right here, this is where the fluid comes in and then works its way down in between and goes through. If there is anything that needs to be processed by the B cells in here, they detect it. T cells can then activate them, and you can activate an immune response against that. So they're just sitting there waiting and patrolling what's coming through. So the fluid comes through, kind of gets filtered as it comes through, and then exits the other side. And not only that, you don't just go through one lymph node. As you're moving up through the system, this image shows it a little better, you go through multiple. So there are multiple nodes that you can go through on your way up through. So lots and lots of cleansing can happen until you drain back into that duct. And then the next organ we have of the lymphatic system is the thymus. Thymus, T for T cells. This is where your T cells mature and become active. So your T cells are very specific, and you don't want a T cell to accidentally be activated against your body's own cells. So they go through this selection event called positive and negative selection, which we are not going to go into the details here. But long story short, the T cells you release from your thymus, it's almost like going to school. They're getting an education on how to not detect your body's own cells, but they are given information for how to detect a different antigen. So that's a foreign invader or something that doesn't match your body. So these thymocytes, that's the early T cells right there, they move through here. And as they're going through the selection event, they become positively or negatively selected as they move through the thymus, and then they can be released as a naive T cell. A naive T cell is an unactivated one. They then patrol and move around the body, go through the lymph nodes and through the cardiovascular system until something comes in and activates them. So, something like, we all know of COVID has the spike protein sticking off of it. So, when this spike protein, that's a surface antigen, gets recognized by T cells being a foreign object, your T cells then activate. They then target B cells to then make antibodies, which are these little Y-shaped proteins, to then come over and tag that virus as being foreign, and then your body knows to come engulf it, destroy it, and so forth. So it can do a couple different things for when these antibodies are made by plasma cells, which are derived from B cells. So if you're getting that the immune system is complex and confusing, it's because there's a lot of cells, a lot of communication, and a lot of confusing stuff going on in the immune system, which is why we're not going into too much detail here in this survey course. And then up next is the spleen. So the spleen is located just to the side of the pancreas. This is the end of the pancreas right here. So the stomach would be, right over here as well. The spleen is an important blood processing area. Sometimes the spleen has a very thin cortex on it. So any spleen inflammation and whatnot can sometimes lead to a ruptured spleen, which is not a great thing because it's highly vascularized. Looking at this more then, there's 2 types of pulps that we say in the spleen. There's red pulp. Red pulp is processing blood. So breaking down red blood cells, making sure your red blood cells are healthy. Red blood cells last about 120 days. I forgot to say that in the last video. Your other formed elements have a very short life of only a couple days. You don't want neutrophils being overactive. But red blood cells, even though they are a nucleate and lack a nucleus, they can last up to 120 days. They get processed and broken down into those heme groups and globin groups. And most of the stuff is reused. Whatever's not reused ends up in your feces. So that's red pulp. The other organ that handles that is your liver, also breaks down red blood cells. So like your iron, you actually reuse most of the iron. Then the white pulp, the white pulp is pretty much, you can think of them as lymph nodes. They are doing similar structures as the lymph node, where you have B cells, you have, here's another germinal center. Germinal centers is where you have seeded B cells and actively proliferating B cells if they are activated. So that would be in the white pulp here of the spleen. So almost like a misplaced lymph node. It's just monitoring what's going through your blood at that time. Tonsils are similar. Tonsils are also little aggregates of lymphoid follicles. So here, lymphoid follicles. These lymphoid follicles are just collections of those germinal centers and areas where lymphatic cells can collect. So you have a couple different tonsils. Here are your pharyngeal tonsils located back here. These ones are your palatine tonsils. And then down here, these ones right here are your lingual tonsils. Back here, you're seeing these swollen palatine tonsils. If I recall correctly, these ones are your adenoids. You might hear of swollen adenoids. Tonsils can be removed. It's perfectly fine. If you look at a histology section of tonsils, they have these germinal centers in them, but they have these little crypts. They're called tonsillar crypts. And the problem with these tonsillar crypts, you can kind of see the little ridges it has right here, kind of showing them. Bacteria can get trapped in there, and if they're not being attacked by your lymphoid follicles, they can actually create a safe space there for bacteria to duplicate, leading to an inflammation and infection of those tonsils. And if you can see here, these tonsils can reduce airflow and cause issues then. So getting them removed, it's no harm done in getting them removed. They're just there as an additional layer of protective mechanisms. We see the same things going on in like our small intestine for any bacteria that might come in from the large intestine. So those are your tonsils. Now, all of this in the lymphatic system's role in immunity kind of tie all this together with the lymphocytes. So we talked about those B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. Those are your major cells of your adaptive immune system. When I say your adaptive immune system, it means they are specific. They can specifically tag specific things on specific pathogens. We compare that with what's known as our innate immune system. That's our built-in immune system, and it's not specific. It's just recognizing general things with bacteria. Like your skin is your surface defense, one of your first lines of defense. You have your mucous membranes, and then you have your second line of defenses, where some cells like macrophages and dendritic cells come in, and natural killer cells come in as well. Natural killer cells are not specific. Natural killer cells here, they can kill virally infected cells, but they're specifically killing cells that lack any fingerprint. They can detect those cells and then kill them and attack them. T lymphocytes here, they can be very diverse, and these T cells actually activate everything else. They activate B cells, and then B cells become plasma cells, which secrete antibodies. Antibodies are those little Y-shaped structures, and they have the binding domain out here, which binds to pathogens, specifically binds to specific pathogens. It gets very complex very quickly when you start talking about the cells of the immune system. But T cells, like an important T cell, is called a helper T cell. A helper T cell is what releases these chemical messengers that activate everything else. HIV is a virus that infects helper T cells. So T cell counts slowly go down. And if T cell counts go down, you no longer activate B cells, which means you no longer activate plasma cells, which means you no longer activate antibodies, which means you no longer have an adaptive immune system, and you only have your built-in barriers like your skin, mucous membranes, and things like that. Means you're immunosuppressed. That's why HIV becomes AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, because of a breakdown of these helper T cells. And just as a reminder here, these T lymphocytes, we showed this image in the last video, are derived from those lymphocytes, so from those hematopoietic stem cells from the red bone marrow. Now, B cells are released in a mature form, but these T cells go to the thymus to be released. And then here we see those NK or natural killer cells, which are also derived from that lymphoid stem cell line. Alrighty, that is all I have to talk about today. So that was your quick and dirty overview of the not only lymphatic system, but some general overviews of the immune system. So hope you enjoyed this video. Like always, if you have questions, please reach out and let me know. But that's all for this day. Have a good one. Bye-bye.